Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar on 5 mistakes that you should definitely avoid during your GMAT, during your GRE prep. Before I get started, I would like to know whether you can hear me loud and clear. So I'm going to add a poll here. If you can hear me clearly, then I would request you to kindly mark yes in the yes and no poll so that I can get started. Okay, so I can see that so far all of you can hear me, which is great. So I'll wait for another 5 seconds, and if I don't see any no's, then I would start the session. Okay, great. So I see that everyone can hear me. So let me just close the poll and get started. Once again, welcome to this webinar where we are going to talk about the major mistakes that people make during their GRE prep. And if you can avoid these mistakes early on, then you can really get an awesome score on your GRE. Before we get started, I'll very quickly introduce myself. So those of you attending the webinar for the first time, my name is Saqib and I'm going to be your host today. I'm the co-founder of GMAT Wiz as well as GRE Wiz, and I'm also the principal architect of the whole design, the intelligence that you see on the Wiz platform, be it GMAT Wiz or GRE Wiz. I've been highly involved in building that product and the intelligence. I've been in this industry for a long time. It's close to 11 years now. I love creating edtech products. I love teaching quant. I love talking about GMAT strategy, GRE strategy, basically focusing on what is the best way of cracking both these exams in the most optimal way. Now, what are we going to discuss in this session? Let's try and understand that first. Okay. Uh, so in this session, what we are going to do is we are going to discuss five different, as I said, the five different kind of mistakes that you should avoid. So first of all, I'll try and summarize those, and then we'll elaborate on each one of them one by one. So the first thing is, we are going to talk about whether what kind of accuracy matters, whether it's the overall accuracy, whether it's individual accuracy, whether it's accuracy in the first section, second section. This is something that has been briefly covered in the strategy webinar also. So I will not go too much into detail in this webinar. All I'm going to do is just touch upon it so that because it's one of the most important aspects and one of the highly a mistake which a lot of students make. But there are other expensive mistakes also. Like for example, people believe that learning shortcuts in quant, learning the the most optimal way of learning solving RC questions. A lot of you might believe that shortcut is the key to success. If you know how to apply shortcuts, you will succeed in the GRE, which I beg to differ, and I'll talk about why I think so. Third, misconception is that practice makes a man perfect. Makes a man perfect, which I don't think it's a misconception. It does make a man perfect, but what kind of practice are you doing and how you should actually practice is something a lot of people make a mistake in, and that's definitely one thing that you should learn early on. Then there's a silly mistake excuse, which I, hear about it a number of times from students who come up and say, "Hey, I did not do well in my test because I made a silly mistake." Then again, after 10 days, people will come up and say, "I am still not doing well because of these silly mistakes." Now, what exactly are these silly mistakes? Why are you calling these silly mistakes? These are things that I would touch upon, and I'll tell you how to better categorize the mistakes so that you can work upon it from day zero or the day that you make that mistake and make sure that they don't occur again. Okay. And lastly, I'm also going to talk about an important aspect. I do hear from students who ask me, is it okay to skip some topics on the GRE? Now, again, the answer is not black and white. It depends. But how much does it depend on, or what does it depend on, is something that you should definitely know early on, so that you can, plan your strategize accordingly. Okay, so I'll start taking each thing one by one. So let's talk about the first thing, which is overall accuracy is all that matters. Now, before I tell you whether it does really matter or it doesn't, and how does what really matters, what do you think? What is your opinion? So those of you who are there in the webinar, I would want you to let me know your opinion on the chat box. And once again, don't be shy. Even if you get the answer wrong, that's totally okay. I want to make it an interactive session, so feel free to let me know your thoughts. Do you think that accuracy is something that matters, or do you think that it's okay? Overall accuracy, as long as I'm getting a good score overall, that's enough. or do you think there's something else that you need to look at? I'll wait for another 10 seconds for your responses. In fact, you can let me know in the yes and no poll also. What do you think? Do you think overall accuracy matters? If you think yes, mark yes. If you think no, mark no. So I want those of you who are still shy, don't want to put anything on the chat box, at least put in your response in the poll. Okay, I can see a lot of you are saying yes. Okay, now it's a 50-50 split. Interesting. Okay, so let me end the poll and about 50% of you think overall accuracy matters, 50% of you think that it doesn't. Well, to tell you the truth, overall accuracy plays a small role in your final score. It does. I'm not saying it doesn't. But what really matters is how well you perform in the first section. Now, those of you who have attended the first webinar, the strategy webinar, I'm sure you must be aware of the fact that if you do well in the first section, be it quant or verbal, doesn't matter. First of all, you're talking about quant, by the way. If you do well in the first section, then even if you perform badly in the second section, your score is still quite high. I know 155 is not what you're targeting. You might be targeting 165, 169. That's totally fine. In those cases, obviously, the score that you would need, the number of correct that you would need in the second section would also need to be high. But the main point is that you need to focus on is that individual accuracy matters in each section more, especially in the first section. The lower the score, the number, the accuracy in the first section, the lower would be your score, overall final score. Even if you do really well in your second section. So notice I did really well in my second section, but still there is a huge difference in scores. So please remember, overall accuracy is something that does matter, but primarily, the major important thing that you should focus on is doing really, really well in your first section as high as possible. So when you're planning or strategizing how you should do your GRE prep and how you should plan your mocks, in those cases, you need to ensure that your first section goes well. And how you need to do well is something as also which I'm going to discuss, so don't worry. But I hope you can see that there's a difference of a huge, there's a 9-point difference. And the same thing goes, for verbal also, by the way. If you notice in verbal also, if you have a very high score in the first quarter, even if you don't perform well in the second quarter, your score is still a decent amount. But if you reverse this, notice that even if you do really well in the first quarter, in the second section, and not do well in the first section, then your score again drops by close to 7 points. So long story short, please remember that focus on your first section. That should be a primary target. And then as far as the second section is concerned, I would say it depends. Okay. It depends on how much are you targeting. What's your target score? If it is close to 159, 160, then you can understand. Now, even if you do get 20 correct here and if you get 6 to 7 correct here, you will cross the 160 benchmark. Okay. But if your target is say 160, 5 or something like this, or 168, then in that case obviously you'll have to get more correct, like about 15 correct or 16 correct to reach that particular score. So what kind of accuracy you would need in the second section is something that you'll have to take a call depending on how much are you targeting. But remember this fact. Now, so to summarize this fact, understand that only having a good accuracy will not help. Okay, along with accuracy, what you need to do is build the right skill. Now, what do I mean by right skill? See, understand in the first section, I'm asking you to get close to 20, 24, close to 20 correct, right? And in the second section, you can obviously target 16, 17, 18 questions if you're targeting a very high score. How would you get that? You would get that by developing your skills of hard questions. What kind of questions you get correct, by the way, kind of determine your skill level. So if you are able to get, say, for example, difficult questions correct, then your skill is higher. And I know it sounds very obvious, but you need to develop that ability to get difficult questions correct also. The moment you can develop that ability, you will be able to do well in the first section. Now, in the second section, if you even for some weird reason, if you're not able to perform, your score will not get hampered. Okay, so don't think out of 40 questions, if I can get 30 correct, I'm done. No, that 30 should have a very good distribution. It should be like this. It should not be like this. Okay, so please understand that if you want to get a 160 plus in any of the sections, what you need to do is, as I told you, that if you do well in section 1, okay, you get higher difficult questions in section 2. Section 2 will have more difficult questions. Let me put it this way. It will have more difficult questions. So your main target is, if you want to get a 160 plus, you have to make the algorithm serve you hard questions in the second section. Okay, how can you ensure that? You can ensure by doing two things. Okay, number one is making sure that you get almost 100% accuracy in the easy and medium question. There should not be any scope of making mistakes in these questions. Okay, you have to have the ability to be able to decide, okay, this is a easy question or this is a medium question, and you should be able to get those correct. And if you want to, and the another thing that you need to do is that you need to get a few hard questions also correct in the first section. So even if you're not able to get all 20 questions correct, let's just say you're given 5 hard questions and 15 easy medium questions, you need to ensure that you can get at least, uh, mm, 3 correct or 2 correct, in order to ensure that the algorithm serves you a difficult section the next time. Okay, and to get hard questions, I've already told you now that you need to develop the right skills. You need to learn how to, you might know the formula, but you should also know how to apply those in difficult questions. You have to learn how not to fall for a trap in a lot of difficult, tricky questions. As long as you're able to identify this and able to achieve it, you will do well in this particular. You will be able to ensure that you do well in the first section, and as well as, and the result of that would be that you would get more hard questions in the second section. Okay, guys. So that was about the first mistake that you should avoid, is making sure that you don't focus a lot on accuracy. I'll pause here for about 15 seconds. If you have any questions, please feel free to post. Let me know if this is perfectly clear or not. I'm adding a poll here again. If it is clear, please mark yes in the yes and no poll. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me in the chat box. Okay, I can see all of you. It's clear to everyone. Please recall the first 2 points. The first 2 points is just, I think this was summary basically, Pujan, is that you need to do well in the first section. That is like the main crux. So they're not 2 points, it's just 1 point. The main point is that you need to do well, get as many questions correct in the first section. How do you do that? You do that by doing two things: making sure that you get all easy and medium questions correct, and you also ensure by getting a few hard questions correct, so that this will ensure that you get more, the second section that you get has more difficult questions. That's all. Okay. Now, let's talk about the second aspect, which is shortcut is the key to success. Now, tell me, how many of you think that shortcut is really important to do well? I've added a poll. If you think it's really, really important to do well on the GRE, then please mark yes. And by shortcut, it could be any shortcut. Shortcut to do well in, RC, shortcut to do well in vocab, shortcut to do well in quant, anything. Okay, once again, okay, so a lot of you think, in fact, about 66% of you think that shortcut is important. Okay, interesting. Okay, I kind of beg to differ. Okay, I'm not saying that it is not important. Okay, but what kind of shortcut are you using? It's very very important to understand that and be able to differentiate. Now let me talk about a few popular strategies that are there that people advocate a lot or students try a lot. The first is, I don't need to be good in calculations, even if because I have a calculator. So since I have a calculator, I will use the calculator as much as possible to do all my calculations. Okay, so that's one kind of a shortcut that you try to use. You don't want to learn to calculate, you want to kind of use the calculator. A second very common shortcut that I've seen people want to apply in reading comprehension is skimming. So if there is a passage given and there are a number of questions attached to it, a lot of people might have learned strategy. Hey, read the first line, read the last line, or read just the last paragraph, or just skim through it very quickly, see the high points, and then look at each and every question. You might. How many of you actually have done the skimming strategy? Just going through the RC questions very quickly, RC passage very quickly, and then moving on to the questions. How many of you have done that? If you have done that, please mark yes. Okay. I can see. Okay, I'll wait for another 10 seconds. Okay, interesting. It's a 50-50 split. Okay. So 50% if you think, 50% if you have done this, 50% if you haven't done that. Now, guys, please understand that skimming is a very bad strategy, honestly. Ideally, you should not use a skimming strategy because it leads to wastage of time. Those who advocate using this method, they are not understanding this fact that once you get a difficult passage, it is more about understanding the passages than understanding just the high level. Because if you're just trying to understand at a high level what is the meaning of the passage, you are definitely going to make a lot of mistakes in the question, because you will not understand in depth you will not understand the RC passage in depth, and then that might lead you to incorrectly infer, and especially inference questions or structure based questions you will make a mistake in. So ideally I would recommend not using this strategy, and I'll also show you why. Vocabulary, obviously you need to learn. There's no doubt about it. You have to learn the words. But sometimes in a question, when you get a vocab question, I've seen people, instead of focusing on the passage that is given, and they just focus on the blanks and the words. They try to understand the meaning. They don't try to understand the context, and somehow try to fit the word into the passage. So if they find a word that is familiar to them, then they might end up marking this as an answer, thinking that okay, I just need to understand the word. As long as I understand the word, it makes a high level sense. Let me put just plug in the that as the answer, which again backfires, especially in hard questions, because in hard questions, apart from understanding the meaning of the words, you also need to understand whether the word that is given would be apt or not. If it is not apt and if you still plug it in, you are going to make a mistake. So ideally you should not do all of these three things. I'm not saying don't bank on calculator, okay, but use it only and only when you have a very very difficult calculation. Let's say for example you have to do 1.04 times 1.95 divided by 2.19, something like this. Here I would not ask you to calculate, honestly. It doesn't make sense. But for example, if they're telling me that hey, 50% was increased, if 500 was increased by 20%, and for that if you're going to use a calculator and you're not able to figure out that you need to do just 20% of this, 20% is 1 by 5 plus 500, which would be 600. If you're not able to do this in 15 seconds, 10 seconds, and you're constantly clicking on the calculator for all such calculations, you will waste a lot of time. And if you waste time, you will not be able to complete all the questions on time, and that's going to be a problem. So find the main thing that you need to do is strike a balance. For especially in quant, you need to strike a balance between when to use your, when to use the calculator and when to use the calculation mentally or on a piece of paper. Because the amount of time that you would spend on clicking on each and every number and then finding out the result is going to be way way high than what you could have done the same thing if you would have done the same thing on the piece of paper. That would have been much more faster. Skimming passage, I would highly recommend not to do, guys. Make sure that you read the passage properly, understand it really well. You might initially feel that you are saving time, but you're not. And here's an example, just to give you an example. I'm sure a lot of you will be able to relate to it. Usually what happens is whenever we get a question or a passage, we read it very quickly. We read the question quickly, we read the passage quickly. Okay. Then obviously if you're reading it quickly, then we only have a rough understanding of what is has been stated. And it's valid for both the passage as well as question. You'll have a rough understanding of what you have said, you have a rough understanding of the question, what the question is asking. And because of that, when you're solving the question, if there are 5 options, then you might be able to eliminate 2 to 3 because you have read at the passage at a high level. So you still have some understanding. I'm not saying that you won't understand anything. But after having this, you'll be stuck between 2 to 3 choices. Okay. And you would not know what to do. And why is this the issue? Because you read it very quickly. So you understand things in bits and pieces. And if it's a difficult question, the answer would be very close. A lot of things might just depend on can or will. These kind of things might, small words can make a huge difference in your answer. Okay. Okay. Chinmay saying, I can't see or hear anything. Guys, please let me know if you can hear me clearly. I think I should be audible. There should not be any issue. I'll start the poll again. Please let me know if you can hear me. Kindly mark yes if you can. You can, right? Okay. So I'm not sure what's the issue. Uh, Let me just reply. Kindly check your internet connection or try rejoining. Okay. Okay, so let's get back to our discussion. So as I was saying that you would be stuck between 2 to 3 answer choices. Okay. And if that's the case, then you would spend a lot of time thinking about how to answer the question. You might reread the answer choices, you might reread the passage, you might reread the question. And this is the biggest culprit. These two things are, they literally eat up your time. And since they're eating up your time, you will get nervous and then you will end up marking something and move on because you're running out of time, which is again a bad strategy. And if you notice the timing, initially you might be able to save a lot of time. You might be thinking, hey, I'm able to do this. By doing this, I'm able to do everything in 1 minute. But what you're not understanding is that you would be spending a healthy amount of time, and you can look at this timing. It's about 1.5 to 2 minutes. You might end up wasting by just trying to reread the stem, reread the passage, and then trying to figure out the answer. So at the end of the day, the question that would have been easily solved in say 1.5 minutes or 1.75 minutes, you would end up taking 2 to 3.5 minutes because you did not understand the passage properly. So guys, it is like really, really, really important that you make sure that you don't read quickly, because if you read quickly, then that's going to be a big problem for you. Make sure that you take your time. Initially, it might seem that you are spending a lot of time, but believe me, if you worry about time, then at the end of the day, you will end up spending more time only. So how do you save time? You save time by spending a little more time out here. Okay, make sure that if you're reading the passage, you read the passage by taking 2 minutes to 3 minutes depending on the length of the passage. Okay, if it's a huge passage, then even 4 minutes is fine. But if you read it properly, what you will realize it, the questions that come attached with it, like if there are 3 questions or 4 questions, you would be able to solve all of these 4 questions in about a minute and not more than that, because you have a very good clarity on what is the passage is talking about. Even if you have to go back to the passage, that won't be a problem because you know where you need to go and look for that particular answer, because you're just trying to confirm something. So that is still faster. So at the end of the day, if you notice, you would end up taking 6 to 8 minutes depending on the length of the passage, and still have a very good accuracy. On the other hand, if you use this strategy, you would be taking 2 to 3.5 minutes per question. So maybe you might skim through the passage in 1 minute, but then understand that you would be taking four times to 8, that's like 9 minutes bare minimum. Or if you look at the higher end, then you're literally spending 14 minutes. So you end up wasting anywhere between 1 to 7 minutes, guys. In fact, if I look at it from the perspective of 6, then you might be wasting 3 to 7 minutes in the exam per passage. So if you have 2 to 3 passages, you might end up wasting 10 minutes of 12 minutes, which is like a huge amount of time. Okay. So long story short, just to summarize, make sure that you don't use shortcuts everywhere. Now, knowing some quant shortcuts or quant methodologies that can help you solve a question quickly, I don't have a problem with that. You can definitely learn those, but don't use these hacky methods to while you're preparing for your GRE. You are definitely going to falter. Okay. Now, let's come to our third point. In the meantime, if you have questions, guys, please feel free to ask me on the chat box again. There's no issue. I'm will be more than happy to answer, take up any of your questions. Okay. So, what's our third problem? Uh, there's a misconception, guys, that people think that practice is all that you need to do. Now, here's what most students do. You start learning a concept, and then you start practicing questions. You keep on practicing questions, keep on practicing questions, and the moment you feel, hey, I've done enough questions, you go and take your mocks. Okay, you take up mocks, and then you realize that you're not doing well in it. Since you're not doing, why are you not doing well in it? You're not doing well in it because you're just focusing on practicing. You're hoping with sufficient practice, your accuracy would improve. Now, I don't deny the fact that sufficient practice is needed, but what you do, the main thing that you miss out is that you have to focus on this part. If you're getting a question wrong, why are you getting the question wrong? What was missing in your approach? What is it that you need to do differently when you're approaching similar questions like these? These are the questions that you need to answer before solving new questions. So if you're taking a quiz of 10 questions today, okay, and if you get, say, for example, 6 correct and 4 incorrect, what you need to do is spend time here, okay? Spend time and understand that why did you get these wrong and what is it that you need to do differently next time to get these correct. Also, don't ignore this. I've seen a lot of people ignore. If they get the question correct, they think, it's done. I don't need to worry about it. No. Here, the question that you have got correct, just go through these solutions and understand whether the solution that you're using is optimal or not. Were you using the best solution possible, or the method that you used was lengthy because of which you ended up taking a lot of time? You have to answer such questions. If you don't do that, if you don't do this analysis, believe me, you can keep on practicing questions. You will see very little improvement in your quant or in your verbal. Okay, so this is a strategy which is not going to work, guys. So the thing that I was talking about is there in this slide. You most of the time review only the wrong questions. Okay, you spend time on option analysis. A lot of people, if they are solving verbal questions, they just look at the options. They don't look at the solutions at all. And obviously, because of this, you will not see any improvement in your score. So make sure that you analyze everything. So now, if you're working on your GRE, if you're preparing for it, uh, what you need to do is follow a strategy like this. By the way, first of all, I'm going to show you a strategy which a lot of people use, which is wrong. Okay. So a lot of people do this. They learn concept, as I told you, and then they practice questions. And this is the cyclical loop that you keep on going, right? Practice, learning concept, practicing question, learning per concept, practicing question. And you'll notice in such cases, you'll get stuck between a particular kind of score. I have a lot of students who come to me and say, "Ki, Sakib, I'm stuck at 150, 155 or 156. I'm not being able to cross the 160 barrier. I don't know what to do." Okay, and the biggest problem out here is that you are just practicing questions and not focusing on how to and you're not focusing on the fact that how to improve or how to get your questions correct. Um, okay, I'll pause here once because Pujayan is saying, sir, please show previous sheet. The previous slide, you mean, Pujayan? Previous slide, by the way. And you'll get the recording, okay? So you don't worry about it. You can look at the recording later on if you're missing out on something. Then, as I was saying that because of this methodology, you will end up getting stuck at a previous place, okay, at a particular score. So the best way to practice is, as I mentioned, that you need to, if you're getting questions wrong, you need to learn the best way to solve that question. So this is a stage which a lot of people miss. You learn concept, but you then need to understand how to solve questions in the most optimal way, in the most best way possible, and then you should move on to practicing questions. Okay, if you are able to do that, you'll realize that I am getting a very good score. Your score will start going up because now you know the best way to solve each and every question. Okay, and you need to maintain this. You need to maintain this loop also. Make sure that if you're making a mistake in a question, then you go and learn that methodology, and then only you move on to practice more questions, guys. Okay, so I hope you will keep this in mind, that you will not practice randomly, and you will refer to the solutions. That's like the first thing. So if you want to learn the best way to solve questions, I know it sounds very obvious, but don't just look at the solution partially. Look at the full solution. Understand if the method that you're using is the best method that is possible. Okay, and as I said, verify each question. Even if you get it right, go through the solution. Make sure that you understand it really well. And ideally, you should spend a lot of time in reviewing the solutions. Understand what is the logic behind it. Understand if you're doing an RCI, did you not understand the passage? Understand if you got a vocab question wrong, did you not understand the argument or the sentence that is given to you properly? If because once you understand the core reason behind getting questions wrong, you can focus on that and improve on that. If you don't understand your mistake, you'll never know what to improve on, and then you'll keep on going to the vicious circle. So, and obviously, as I said, while leaving the solution, notice where how is your solution different from ours? And if your solution is not optimal, then obviously you need to make sure that you learn the right solution. So, long story short, learning the right solution is going through the solutions very meticulously, making sure you understand everything properly. Okay, and that is why we introduced the concept of concept booster, at least as far as GRE which is concerned. What we believe is that when you're in the learning phase, after you solve a question, you should analyze the solution. And when you're analyzing the solution should be in the form of video. So we give a lot of video solutions in our course. So especially showing you how to solve a question. So if you're wondering from where to do these, how to figure out, I would highly recommend looking at GRE Viz, because there all our concept booster solutions are video solutions, and they can really help you understand what is the best way to approach question. And once you understand that, you can fix the gaps which are there in the way you're solving questions. Okay, so make sure that you learn the methodology really well. If you're looking for a resource, I would say that definitely go and look at GRE Viz. That's one of the best place to figure out how to learn the methodology of each and every question and each every type. Okay, so now guys, we are done with 3 of them. We've understood we don't need to use shortcut. We've understood accuracy is not important, and we have also done 3 kind of mistakes at this point of time. So let's look at our 4th mistake, which is, I think, a very important one, which is the silly mistake excuse. Now, people come up and tell me that I've made a silly mistake, as I told you at the starting of the webinar. But ideally, if you keep on discarding each and every mistake, or if you keep on categorizing all your mistakes as silly mistakes, honestly, it will be very difficult to improve. What you need to do is very specifically categorize what is that mistake, why did you make that mistake. So for example, I'll start with 3 because that's something easy and everyone can relate to. You must have seen now when you're doing a quant question, after you look at your answer, maybe you've got 21 and you notice in the correct answer is 25, and you'll say, oh my bad, I forgot to add 4 to it. Oh, it's a silly mistake, I should have added it. Okay, or you might make a mistake of the question that I was showing you, 20% of 500. So instead of writing 20% as 1 by 5, you might end up writing it as 1 by 4 and doing the calculation, ended up getting 125 and marking your answer as 625. And you'll say, oh, I made a mistake, a silly mistake of writing it as 1 by 4. So understand, guys, that these are not silly mistakes. This mistake should be clearly categorized as, I have a tendency of making a calculation mistake. Okay, if you want to do well, you can further categorize it. You'll say, what kind of calculation mistake do you make? Do you make mistakes when you're dealing with percents? Do you make mistakes when you're dealing with decimals? Do you make mistakes when you're multiplying, dividing stuff? What is the issue? Because the moment you understand the issue, you would be able to work on it. Okay, so if you're making calculation mistake, categorize it properly. If you're making, if you're not reading the question stem and you're making mistake of that, write down. It wasn't a silly mistake. It is my, I have a tendency of not reading the question carefully. So the thing that I need to improve on is make sure that whenever I solve a quant question, I will read the question stem very, very slowly. Okay. There are two more issues. First one I just catered. Now, if you're not reading properly, then that's one of the mistakes that you have to clearly categorize. In certain questions, be it quant or verbal, you might not be able to draw the right inferences. So you must have seen a lot of inference questions on RC, reading comprehension. You might not be able to draw the right inferences, because of which you might be making a mistake. A lot of word problem questions in quant also have the same issue, that you might have to translate first, understand what the question is talking about before you're able to solve it. In such scenarios also, there's a chance that you might not be able to draw the right inferences because you're making a mistake. So long story short, the point that I'm trying to make here, guys, is that make sure that you categorize your mistake really well from day one, because if you do that, you would know where you need to improve. If you keep on categorizing your mistakes as silly mistakes, believe me, it will be very, very difficult to improve at the end, because you'll not know where do you actually need to improve. Okay. I hope this is clear. I'll add a yes or no poll quickly. Please let me know if this is perfectly clear till this point. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and then we'll come to the final aspect. Okay, I can see that it is clear to everyone, which is good. So let's talk about our final aspect then. Okay. So, okay. Now, the question that we have here, just my bad, let me go back once. Now, tell me, what do you think about this? Do you think that it is okay to skip questions? What do you think? In fact, let me bring up the poll again. What do you think? Is skipping questions fine? Is skipping some topic while you're preparing for the GRE okay? Okay, a lot of you are saying no. Um, Yes, Aishru, we will provide the whole video afterwards. You'll usually get it on Monday, because we convert this recording and mail to students who attend the webinar. Okay, if you don't get it, then you can definitely write to support@greviz.com and they will provide you the recording. But we are recording this, so it's not a problem. You will get it. Okay. Okay. So let me look at the result of the poll. 50% if you think it's okay, 50% if you think it's not. Okay. So I think everyone's divided on this one. Okay. Pujant, unfortunately, we cannot share the slides. That's something we don't do. We share the recording, but we don't share the slides. I'm really sorry about that. Okay. So let me talk about whether skipping some topics is fine or not. So first thing which I would add here is that understand that if your target score is less, then it's okay to. When I say less, if you're targeting, 150, 149, feel free to skip some topics, not a problem. But if you're targeting anywhere above 159, 160, close to that, or 160 plus, it's not good to skip topics. And let me tell you why. Remember, like I was talking about something in one of the mistakes, that ideally accuracy is important per section, and you need to do well in the first section, right? That was the first thing which I talked about. Now understand, there's the one thing which I mentioned there was that you need to get your easy and medium questions correct. Now let's say you ended up skipping 2 to 3 topics which you're not comfortable. You say, I'm not comfortable with permutation combination, I want to skip it. You might say, hey, I'm not comfortable with all the vocabulary words that are there in the list. I will do just 200 to 300 of them and I'll be okay with it. Now, if you're somebody who thinks that way, then let me show you what could be the problem. So roughly, this is obviously these are rough numbers, but at a high level, this is the kind of distribution that you would see on the test. So notice one thing out here, that what's going to happen is that if you skip some topics, then in that case, you will not be able to get all 14 questions correct out here. because it is quite possible that you might get a medium question which might be based on permutation combination. You might get a question which might be based on coordinate geometry and topics that a lot of people come up and tell me that they want to skip. So what's going to happen is that maybe, just maybe, out of 14 questions, you might end up getting 10 correct, or maybe if you're very lucky, 11 correct, something like that. But you would still have to miss out on 2 to 3 questions, and in worst case scenario, maybe even 4 questions. You might miss out on that. So you can understand the amount of pressure that would be there on the remaining 6 questions. You would have to get, if you want the second section to be hard, then if you get 10 correct, then you need to get 5 hard correct. If you get 11 correct, you need to get 4 hard correct. And that's a lot. So if we will be literally looking at 60% or 70% accuracy here, which is not that easy to achieve. Because if you're not being able to achieve a good accuracy in the easy medium questions, how are you going to achieve a good accuracy in the hard questions? Okay. So if you skip topics, then you would not be able to do easy and medium questions properly. And then that's going to be a problem. But understand, if you do well in the easy and medium questions, if you don't skip anything, there's a good chance, as I told you, you'll get all of them correct. Even if you don't get all of them correct, let's take a worst case scenario. Okay, let's assume that you get 12 correct. Okay, then in that case also you just need to get 2 correct out here, or worst case again 3 correct, not more than that. So that's still 50% accuracy. And if you're getting two, if you need to get 2 questions correct, then that's about 33.3% accuracy. So if you get 15 questions correct, you are guaranteed that there's a very good chance that you will get this. The second section would be a hard one. Obviously, you need to get as many questions correct as possible. But from where will you get those questions correct? Right? You have to get those correct from these 14 questions. So our target primarily is to always get these 14 questions correct. They get 100% accuracy in it. Or at the worst case, you get at least 13 correct. And then here we reduce our pressure as much as possible. So to summarize, no, it is not good to skip any topic. Even if you're targeting a 158, 160, make sure that you go through all the topics. Yes, for topics that you're not comfortable with, the only thing that you can do is not focus a lot on hard questions if you want to. That's still fine, because your target is to get all the easy and medium questions correct. As long as you're able to do that, you are, you're good to go. In hard questions, you can do those hard questions of topics that you're comfortable with. Okay, so long story short, if I have to summarize, what I would say is make sure that you get all the easy medium questions correct, and make sure that you don't leave any questions unattempted just because you feel I'm not comfortable with the topic, so let me leave some questions out. And the last point is actually very important. Don't spend too much time on a few questions. The good part about GRE is that you can move from question 1 to question 2 freely. So what ideally you need to do is make sure that you, first of all, so basically divide it into two to three rounds. In the first round, you go through each and every question one by one, one by one, one by one, one by one, and only do those questions that you're super confident with. You're 100% sure that you know how to do it. Okay. In the second round, what you need to do is, ideally in the first round, bookmark those questions which you feel that you may get correct. Okay. There could be questions that you would definitely don't want to do. So don't bookmark them. So first round, do questions that you're 100% sure, and bookmark those that you may be able to do it. In the second round, do those questions that you may be able to do it. Okay. And then if you're still left with time, then you can do the ones that you are not comfortable with. If you're not left with time, or if you're running out of time, then at least mark something in it if you want to. But so don't leave any question unattended. Okay, I can see a question in the chat box. So the first section will be the medium one, right? Not the mixture of easy medium. No. So Pujant, what you need to understand is that the score given to each and every question is the same in the first section, but it will be a mix of easy, medium, and hard questions. So all three variety would be there. The amount of easy, medium, hard question varies. Okay. So if you're getting 20 questions, then there's a chance that you might get 4 easy, 6 medium. In fact, it will be slightly higher, I should say, 9 medium, and then maybe 7 hard, something like that in the first. If you do well, then in the next section, you would have higher number of hard questions. You may have 10 hard questions, 8 medium questions, 2 easy questions. So the number of easy questions would decrease in the second section. Okay. And that is why I'm emphasizing on the fact that though since the score is also same, thank you for raising this question. So guys, understand, even if it's an easy question, medium question, hard question, for a particular section, the score of each question is the same. Okay, so easy questions are also have a similar score. Medium question also have a same score. Hard question also has the same score. So why not first of all do those easy and medium questions? Let me get the score that I want to. That is why this strategy is being suggested. That in the first round, do those questions which are easy and which are medium. That you're 100% sure that you'll be able to do it, because the scores are the same. So why waste your time doing hard questions in the first round? You should look at hard questions only when in the second round, or when you are sure that you have exhausted all type of questions that you could have done. Okay, so I hope this is clear, guys. If you have any questions till this point, please feel free to ask. What I'm going to do is I'm going to very quickly summarize what we have just learned. So we learned these five aspects today. One was that overall accuracy is something that doesn't matter. What really matters is your individual section accuracy, especially section one. So make sure that while preparing for your mocks and everything, you focus on that first. Shortcut is not the key to success. Don't use hacky solutions. Make sure that you use solutions. You can use a little bit of shortcut in quant questions, but don't overuse calculators. Don't try to skip RCs. Don't do all these kind of things, because they are going to lead you nowhere basically. Practice is definitely required, but make sure that you focus on solutions, you focus on the methodology, and ideally try to learn from video solutions, because those solutions do actually show you how to approach a question. So we do have our free trial, guys. If you want to go through it once, I would recommend going through it, look at the video solutions, and if you like it, if you want to use GRE to prepare, you can definitely take a look at it. I've shared it with you on the chat box. Okay. Silly mistake again, please don't do it if you're especially in an early stage of your prep. Make sure that you categorize it really well. Meticulously categorizing your segregation should be better basically. Don't say silly mistakes. If it's a, don't say just calculate. It's write down what kind of calculation mistakes I'm making. Write down if if not reading questions properly, make sure that you jot that down. And finally, guys, it's not okay to skip some topics. Make sure that you are comfortable with easy and medium questions of all topics. And hard, obviously, of most of the topics. You can skip one or two here and there if you want to. Okay. So that's it from my end, guys. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. We have about 5 minutes with us, so I'll be more than happy to take up any questions that you may have. Okay. I am sharing our details also here. If you want to write to us later on, if you have any questions regarding GRE Prep, you can feel free to write to us at this email ID, support@grewiz.com. And I've shared the free trial link on the chat box. Make sure that you go through it. Okay. Now let's look at the chat box very quickly. Okay, so there's one question. What if you get three math sections? So Pooja, and there's something that you cannot do anything about. If you get an experimental section which turns out to be a math section, then it turns out to be a math section. That is something that you cannot, you know, you will not be able to know which one is an experimental one. The idea, Pooja, and understand this, is to focus on this part. I'll go here. This focus on this part, whatever be the section, as long as you are doing this, making sure that you're doing the easy ones first, easy and medium ones first, that you're totally comfortable with. Then you are making sure that you're doing ones that you think that you may be able to do it. This will always help you maximize the number of questions that you can do correctly. Okay. So if you follow this strategy, you will not have to worry whether this is section one, whether this is section two, or whether this is section three. And I'm assuming everyone who's attending this webinar, all of you would want to do well in all the sections, right? Whether it's section one or section two. So make sure that you do all sections well. Primarily, the focus should be to do well in first section. The reason I'm focusing on first section is I don't want you to think, oh, no, I've done well in my first section, so I don't need to do well in my second section. If you're targeting 165, 168 in quant or verbal, then honestly, you'll have to do well in both these sections. Okay. You're welcome, Sajiro. We'll share the recording, and once again, if you don't get it, please don't worry. The email I've shared the email ID here. Write to us on Monday, and we will share the recording with you. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Okay, so I don't see any more questions. If you have any, please feel free to write to us and we'll take up your queries. Okay, I'm ending the session now, guys. Have a great day. Bye.